Hello, beautiful community. Trump's tariffs have a strong fascist element, and understanding that actually might make you freak out less and be soothed by the fact that living a political life to a large extent just is understanding politics. And that can help. The question I'm getting more than any other in the last day or two in particular is, what do I do when I wake up? I look out of the window and the politics and the economics that I see doesn't make any sense. It looks mad. How am I meant to not go mad in that kind of reality? So let's delve into this a little bit. Now, Trump's tariffs feel counterproductive on any economic picture of reality. They feel arbitrary, right? It's not clear what kind of manufacturing Trump wants in the United States and what he doesn't want. They don't feel intelligently targeted. You can imagine intelligently targeted tariffs based on solid bipartisan consensus, thereby making targeted tariffs stably last, and the world can react to that appropriately. And they're also liable to change. And they're also liable to talk about them changing without them changing itself being a destabilizing force, which is very difficult for economic actors, for companies to make decisions. A provisional remark first. The weirdness of what we are seeing is less weird if you put it in historical context. When you go from thinking about the recent past to the past more generally for your political context, you come to see that levels of weirdness we are seeing have certainly been reached and exceeded in the past. And in some ways, they've been even reached in the recent past. So think of the West's use of soft and hard power in its decisions to engage in wars of choice just in the last quarter century. Now, the individuals who made the decision to go to war in Iraq weren't as mad as Trump, but the decision was rather mad. And in fact, some of the individuals involved were spectacularly capable politicians with certain elements of madness. For example, Tony Blair, a resplendently competent political actor, had a certain kind of fetishistic moralization about, isn't Saddam evil? Isn't Saddam evil? So we have seen our states, our governments act weirdly even in the recent past, and we've got to recognize that. But let's focus in on what we've got at hand now. What we're looking at is, to a good extent, economic policy not driven by economic rationality. There is an intentional element there. So Trump has consciously used tariffs for political purposes with Panama, Canada, Mexico. But there is something more important here, and that's just when we're witnessing an excessive subservience of economics to politics of a functional kind. That's to say, subservience of economics to politics that we're witnessing irrespective of what the actors involved are actually thinking. So let's clarify that a little bit. We've got to an extent a situation of a leader acting recklessly to clear the political scene. Much of Trump's policies, and we've talked about this in the context of Doge recently, are about deletion to clear space, to clear elbow room for a leader to be beyond the law. So what we've got is shifting conceptions of what the leader, and by extension the movement, the state, the people want, becoming taking priority over economics. Leaders' whims take priority over economic rationality. So this is not economic rationality, but the rationality of making economic policy subservient to the enterprise of putting the leader beyond the law. And also, what we're looking at is economic rationality becoming subservient to techniques used to put the leader beyond the law. For example, blaming foreigners, becoming a central feature of economic policy. Let's come to fascism. What you've got at the moment is the liberal commentariat absolutely freaking out, because what they're seeing is not just stuff they don't want to see, but it's stuff that doesn't make sense. And part of the reason for the depths of the freakout, which is unhealthy because you've actually got to think about constructively challenging Trump, the reason for the freakout is partly just how economics-centered, economics rationality-centered liberal politics is for most, but not all, liberals, right? So people are saying, I'm not seeing the economics in the economics, and so what is this madness? Now, fascism has two ways of being talked about. One I call political, and another I call proper or intellectual. The political way of talking about fascism is some kind of very simple-minded definition of fascism, with a very small d, that you can use in politics that doesn't require telling a big historical or big conceptual story about what fascism or ideology in general is. And that idea of the political sense of fascism goes for me with the notion of being arbitrarily taken away in the middle of the night by the state. And in this regard, you could argue plausibly that at this stage the Trump regime is not fascist, because the number of people who are being arbitrarily taken away has grown, but it's very small. So we're seeing elements of fascization there, but it's very limited. But when we talk about fascism proper, a bigger truth is revealed about what we're seeing with the tariffs. Now notice some features of fascism proper. A kind of blend of conservatism and radicalism. You want to radically remake society via returning it to a past that typically is a past that never was. You've got the centrality of the state. You've got the equation of the leader with the state and the state with the people. You've got the cult of the leader, right? The sort of romantic notion. Again, you're seeing these derivations of fascism from important European traditions in the 19th century. The cult of the leader, whereby the notion of collective self-realization is tied to the will of a single individual. You've got force as an end in itself. You've got the aestheticization of force. You've got an aspiration for public mobilization. But there is an important other feature of fascism that has rightly been emphasized recently by Jason Blakely and some others, both in public and in his recent book, Lost in Ideology. And Jason absolutely rightly emphasizes two features of fascism, which I'll put in my own words. One is subservience of economics to politics. But the second is what I would call a kind of economic sluttiness. Jason rightly says, fascism borrows economic policy from other ideologies. So it can do free markets, it can do protectionism, it can do welfare. And it's that kind of slatiness that confuses some historically wonky commentators like Jordan Peterson, who claim that what we saw in the 20th century might not have been the F stuff or the N stuff, but in fact just socialism. And so when Jordan Peterson says that, he is misunderstanding not just the F stuff and the N stuff, but what ideology is altogether, which is highly embarrassing. I often talk about hyper-neoliberalism. And what I mean by that is a kind of historical drift for which there is always potential structured into neoliberalism, from neoliberalism to hyper-neoliberalism. So neoliberalism is an emphasis on the primacy of the market of a magical kind, in my sense of it. And hyper-neoliberalism is a conflation of the market with a kind of unbounded competition of all against all. So you kind of drift from putting primacy on the market to just arriving at a politics where you think might is right. You've got to be careful about how you speak about this, because you want to avoid the lazy and self-refuting and depoliticized left-wing idea that either liberalism is itself fascist or that liberalism is a kind of inevitable path to fascism, right? A path that folks all around, and folks on the left too, would warn us against, in a path that actors like Alexander Dugin would positively applaud. So this reveals both the hybridity of ideologies, Jason Blakely would put it, but it also reveals the special hybridity of the way fascist ideology deals with economics, and the way it is both slutty in its economic policy and borrowing things from all over the ideological spectrum in the economy, and the way it makes the political the economic subservient to the political. So, just to review what we've said a moment ago, part of what we're seeing, right, is a fascistized subservience of economics to politics. Let's repeat. Shifting conceptions of what the leader wants, and the leader here is equated with the movement, the people, and the state, take priority over economics. The rationality isn't economic rationality, but the rationality of making economic policy subservient to the enterprise of the leader. One of the things that the leader wants is putting himself beyond the law. And indeed the subservience of economic rationality to the actualization of techniques used by the leader to put himself beyond the law, just named sort of blame foreigners, blame outsiders, blame enemies without and within. So this does not mean that we are labeling Trump with the F word definitively, but this means that we're understanding that there's a significant wash of F with Trump. And that should allow us to see what's happening as much more of a version of ideological and historical normal than the freaking out liberal commentariat are making it out. And a final remark about destructive aspirations rather than just misguided constructive aspirations. Understand that political projects we're increasingly going to see in the West are not just going to have constructive aspirations that you don't like, or constructive aspirations that don't make sense on their own terms, but positively destructive aspirations. So there is an element here, right, where is the Trump movement is trying to destroy what's good about America or what's good about Europe. It's trying to destroy elements of democratic culture, for example. Don't misunderstand the extent of destructive aspirations at hand in your politics, including the destructive aspirations at hand in Trump's tariff policy. We'll continue grounding ourselves. Thank you so much for being with me today. Lots of love.